They have a couple of exhaust vents. They have rain caps. They have a roof mounted power attic vent. Now, you'll notice this doesn't say cover only. This is a common mistake that I see a lot of new people make when they're talking about, hey everyone, this is Andy with Patterson Adjuster Training. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a reconciliation between the carrier estimate and the contractor's estimate. First, I need to define what a reconciliation is. So what happens is you have the adjusters that go out and write the initial estimate on a storm or deployment somewhere. At some point in the future, the customer will pick out a contractor, the contractor will write an estimate, and then they'll send it to the insurance company. If there's differences between the insurance estimate and the contractor's estimate, then the adjuster needs to reconcile those differences. Now, a lot of times contractors put dumb stuff on estimates that they know they're not going to get paid for. As an example, I was working Fort Worth several years ago, and our estimate was like $230,000. Contractor's estimate was like $450,000. Well, I initially did my review. I noticed that the contractor had $175,000 on the estimate for ALE expenses.
Come on!
First off, what contractor in their right mind would want to manage ALE for a customer? Second, why are you putting $175,000 on there when you don't know what the cost is going to be? So I called this contractor and I said, hey, I noticed you have $175,000 on your estimate. That's normally not something the insurance company is going to pay through a contractor. Is that something you're wanting to take on? And he said, no, I'm not willing to take that on. I just threw that on there to get the insurance company's attention.
Come on!
How about just calling the insurance company? Why are you putting $175,000 on an estimate just to get the insurance company's attention? Just call them or email them. Not only that, how does that look to the customer that you're putting a bunch of garbage on an estimate that you're not going to manage or you're not going to be involved in? It makes no sense. It's just a bad look for a contractor. So I've got a reconciliation that I've done, and this would apply for any situation where the insurance company uses Xactimate and the contractor uses Xactimate. So step one is call the customer and ask them if they're using this contractor. They may say, no, we're not using them. Great. If they're not using them, you don't have to do the reconciliation. Why would you try to reconcile an estimate from a contractor that's not going to be utilized? Now, if they are going with this particular contractor, let them know that you got the estimate and you're going to be figuring out what the differences are. There may be good reasons why their estimate is higher. There may not be good reasons why their estimate is higher, but you need to figure out what the differences are and that you will call them back to go over that. Now, you also need to ask them if they've signed anything with this contractor, and also ask them if they've talked to the contractor about a start date. If they're starting tomorrow, then you may want to caution them before they start any repairs or before they sign anything. They need to give you the opportunity to figure out those differences, because you wouldn't want the policyholder stuck with some expenses that the policy doesn't pay for. So that's why the start date is important, and also if they've signed anything, and just caution them not to sign anything until you get your reconciliation done. Now then, after that, explain the process. Tell them, hey, I'm going to take a couple of days to get the reconciliation done. I'm going to figure out the differences. I'll call you back to go over everything, and then we'll go from there. The one thing to keep in mind whenever you're trying to reconcile an estimate is you're not reconciling the dollar amount, you're reconciling the scope. So if the contractor is using Xactimate, insurance companies using Xactimate, then if the scope is correct, then the pricing is going to work itself out. So don't kill yourself or don't stress yourself out trying to match dollar for dollar what the contractor is wanting. So once you get off the phone with the policyholder, the real work begins. Now, this is my favorite part of the reconciliation process. It's because you get to figure out what the differences are. Now, once you figure out the differences, you're going to feel a lot more in control. Whenever you're just looking at dollar figures, everything's just coming at you, it gets a little overwhelming just because it's like, my gosh, I'm $80,000 difference. Where are these differences at? That's the key. You have to find the differences. So you have to take some time up front to figure out what the differences are. So what I do is I put estimates side by side. Usually I have dual monitors, and then I have an Excel sheet or a Google Doc, and I figure out what the differences are. So I've got a reconciliation that I've done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the insurance company's estimate first, then the contractor's estimate, and then I'm going to show you what you're going to do next. So let's take a look at the insurance company's actual estimate. So we have the tear-off up here, and we have the tear-off for the 812 steep charge. We have the tear-off for the 1012 steep charge. Then we have the laminate shingles put back or replacement, and we're using the auto waste calculator just for this example. And so here's we have the put back steep charge for the 812, and then we have the put back for the 1012 steep. Then we have asphalt starter strip, we have hip shingles, drip edge, then we have our pipe jacks. Now these items here, the starter, hip, ridge shingles, drip edge, and flashing, it's just replace only. So when you're scraping a slope off or the entire roof, all of those components are coming off with those shingles. It really doesn't take that much longer when you're scraping off drip edge, hip and ridge shingles. You're just scraping it all off with your roofing shovel, and those are coming off all at once. Now if you have a stubborn piece of drip edge that was nailed 500 times on one eave or one rake, yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer, but not enough to really make any difference. Now you probably will get some reconciliations requesting removal and replacement of those items, but check with your carrier. Most carriers will say if you're doing a total roof or you're doing an entire slope, those roof accessories on that slope or on that roof are going to be scraped off all at one time, and so you wouldn't include a separate line for removal of that item. So that's why I only have replace only. Now when you get down here to these rain caps, those rain caps are sitting on top of a pipe coming through the roof, and they've got set screws or rivets that a contractor is going to have to drill out or take the set screws out, take it off, throw it away, put the new one on. So you would include removal and replacement of those rain caps because they're not coming off with the roof. Now same thing with the power attic vent cover. It's those big mushroom looking things on top of a roof. Its job is to exhaust the hot air or the cold air inside of an attic space, and they have a thermostat, and when it reaches a preset temperature, a fan kicks on and it's supposed to vent the hot air or the cold air out of that attic. So on the metal roof, it's separate. We've got the metal roofing panel, we got the rake and gable trim, and then we got the pitch transition strip that goes across here where the metal meets the shingle roof. And so we're at a grand total $15,425. And you'll notice that there's nothing added on here for general contractor's overhead and profit that applies to the entire job. Now each individual line item does have overhead and profit built in. When you're talking about general contractor's overhead and profit, it's looking at the job globally. Now this will be carrier specific. Each carrier may have its own philosophy on how to apply general contractor's overhead and profit. A lot of them want you to look at the overall job and determine, is it complex? Does it require scheduling? Does it require coordination of when material hits the grounds or when trades show up? If you don't have anything like that, then a lot of carriers say don't add general contractor's overhead and profit because it's not warranted, because the job really isn't complex and requires little or no scheduling. Okay, so now let's look at the contractor's estimate. And so the contractor, they have the August price list for Tulsa, Oklahoma. One thing that I've noticed is this metal porch roof, they've included this metal porch roof in the square footage calculations for the entire roof. And then they've also added those metal components separately. And this is not a real contractor, this is just a simulated estimate that I put together. They have the tear off of the laminate shingles here, then they have the put back of the shingles, and then they're removing and replacing the hip and ridge shingles. So in other words, they're doing the removal and the replacement, and that's not necessary. Again, all of that stuff's getting scraped off with the roof at one time. Same with the starter strip, the drip edge, and the pipe jacks. So we wouldn't want to adjust our estimate. So they got the hip and ridge shingles, they got starter, they got drip, they got lead pipe boots. I think our estimate had just a regular kind. They have a couple of exhaust vents. They have rain caps. And then the contractor has remove and replace roof mount power attic vent. Now this is a common mistake that I see new folks making quite a bit. When they're adding a power attic vent, they add the line code RFG PAV, which is power attic vent, and they call that good. They leave it and they move on. Well, that's the wrong code. And a lot of contractors try to slip that through as well. This line code is replacing the entire assembly. So it's replacing the motor, the thermostat, everything associated with the whole assembly is being replaced. You've got two of these at a cost of $620. The line code that you want to use is RFG PAVC, which stands for Power Attic Vent Cover Only, which is what we have on our estimate. And then they've got ice and water barrier. It says required by IBC 2015, which they're saying International Building Code 2015 edition requires them to put ice and water barrier on. And then they're re-nailing the sheeting, which you're going to see that a lot. They don't reference any code or anything. And then they're going to detach and reset the satellite dish. Now here's their steep charge, but it looks like they're adding the entire house as a steep charge 1012. And we already know that the metal roof is a 512, so it doesn't get a steep charge. The hip extension off the front is an 812, so it doesn't get a 1012. And so they just lumped everything in it as one, probably hoping the insurance company didn't check it. So anyway, they got the metal roof, they got the rake and gable trim, they got the pitch transition, and they got 8 hours of general cleanup. Their note says this is required to clean up miscellaneous roofing debris around the perimeter of the home. And they're adding general contractors overhead and profit, 10% overhead, 10% profit, grand total of $26,230.74. Hey, I just wanted to stop the video real quick to tell you about a couple of things that I think you need, and they're completely free. I built them for you to help you on your deployments. The first one is the free roofing field guide. It has a picture of the most common roofing components that you're going to see, along with a brief description and the Xactimate category and selector codes that you should use when you're putting them on your estimate. Now the other one is a hurricane checklist. With hurricane season upon us, you may get a deployment to work a hurricane event, but you're not sure what to pack. Don't worry, I've got you covered. This hurricane checklist is a list of items that you need to take with you when you get sent to your first hurricane. There are things that are specific to working hurricanes that you may not see working other events. So make sure you get both of those free resources. The link for both of them are in the description below. Now let's get back to the video. Now let's go to our recon differences. And this is what I do on every reconciliation I get, is I have a column for carrier estimate and contractor estimate. I list out what the item is, I list out the action, I list out the quantity, and then over here you want to list out what the difference is and what you're planning on doing about it, or what the result of your review is. So we've got removal 26.65, contractor has 28.91. It says contractor estimate has included the metal roof square footage in the dwelling roof. In other words, they named the metal roof a subgroup of the dwelling roof, so its square footage is included in the dwelling roof. Mine is separate. We wouldn't owe for the shingles on the metal roof because it's a metal roof. And then we've got shingles with felt. The difference again is that metal roof. Now the carrier estimate, we have a steep charge on the 812 portion of the roof. Tear off is 8.36, and then put back is 9.33, which accounts for waste. The contractor has nothing because obviously they added it all right here. Contractor has metal roof and all slopes listed as 1012. Obviously is incorrect, and so all of these steep charges on the carrier estimate is correct. And so we have the same note on the steep charges that the contractor has added all of the slopes, all of the roof as a 1012 and applied that steep charge to all of the slopes. And that's incorrect, and so we're not going to change anything on our estimate. Okay, so now we'll skip down to hip and ridge shingles. Under remove, we don't have anything because again, everything is being scraped off at once. The contractor has included the linear foot of hip and ridge shingles, And I just put item is coming off with the shingles, no changes needed to carrier estimate. And then we've got the putback or the replacement of those shingles the same, and I put both the same. Drip edge, kind of the same thing. Contractors including the removal. We're not including the removal because they're getting scraped off all at once. The linear foot is different, but the contractor's estimate includes the linear foot for the metal roof, and that's not correct. So the drip edge is only on the shingle part of the house. The contractor, again, has added the porch roof or the metal roof as part of the dwelling roof, and they didn't break out that linear feet for the drip edge, so that's why it's different, so there's no changes needed. Now, they included the removal of the pipe jacks. We're not doing that. There's 3 of them, and I put pipe jack and then in parentheses contractor estimate is lead. Now, I looked at the photos. Those 3 pipe jacks are the lead pipe boots, so I put reviewed photos, pipe boots are lead, updated the carrier estimate. So that's one where we looked at and we saw that the contractor was right. We needed to adjust our estimate, which I did. Now, on our original estimate, we didn't have any exhaust vents on there. Contractor has 2, and this is actually listed wrong, but you kind of get the idea. It says, reviewed the photos. There are 2 4-inch exhaust vents, updated carrier estimate. And on the estimate, it is correct. I just have it labeled, listed here wrong. So there we go. So we had 0. We're updating our new estimate to include 2. Rain caps, we have 2. The contractor has 3. Reviewed photos, there are 3 5-inch rain caps, updated the insurance estimate. So again, that's one where we're adding. Let's see, power attic vent cover. We have 2 on our estimate. Contractor has none. Power attic vent assembly, the contractor has 2. And we have none. And that's because they're using the wrong line code. They're actually bidding to replace the entire motor assembly. Now, if it's damaged by the named peril, then obviously we need to include that. But there's no notes in here about that being damaged. This was a hailstorm, and so chances are just that metal cover is damaged, which is why we're replacing that. So we're not adding anything to our estimate. And it says contractor estimate includes power attic vent assembly. Only the covers are damaged. No changes to carrier estimate. Satellite dish, we both got that on there. Metal roofing. Our square footage is different. Contractor has a different eave measurement, but there's no supporting documentation showing why their measurement is different. So there's no changes needed to the carrier estimate. Now, if they would have produced something showing that we had the measurement wrong, then that would be a different story. So the metal roof, we've got the gable trim and the pitch transition. We both have that listed correctly. Then we have these general cleanup hours. Now, if you go into each individual line item, you're going to see where it includes in the supporting events time for setup, tear down, cleanup. It's already built into the line items for that. It's not warranted for this job. So I put additional cleanup, not necessary, not needed for the job, no changes. Now, if there was something out of the ordinary that the contractor drew your attention to, that's not something you normally see, then you might be able to include something for that. Re-nailing the sheeting, you're going to see that a lot. There's no code language or anything like that, so it's not necessary. You'll see that pretty common on a lot of supplements that you get. I've done a lot of roofs. I've never had to re-nail sheeting down when I pulled up shingles off a roof. So in this case, it's not reasonable or necessary, so we're not making any changes to the carrier estimate. Now, if they produce some code language, like in Florida or someplace, that requires them to re-nail every piece of sheeting, then that's a different story. You could take a look at it. And then they got ice and water barrier. This is Tulsa, Oklahoma. There is no code that requires ice and water barrier to be installed on the eaves of a home. I was working in Dallas, and this contractor sent me a supplement and had a bunch of other junk on there, but he had this on there specifically, and he referenced the code, and I went and looked up the code. Well, the code he had was for Iowa, not Texas. And so you'll want to go look up those codes. One, just for your knowledge, you can learn. And then 2, they may try to slip something in that you're not aware of. So we're not including that. It's not required by code. Now, if the policyholder had the ice and water barrier on their house, that's an easy supplement. Contractor just takes a picture of it and sends it in. But there was no photos or anything. Contractor saying it's required by code. It's not. We're not adding that. And then general contractor's overhead and profit we're not adding because job is not complex, requires no coordination, so it's not warranted, no changes to the carrier estimate. So our difference is about $10,500. And so these things that we're going to add, I went ahead and added them. If you ever work a claim where a couple of people have went in and revised an estimate and they didn't tell you what the revisions were, or it's not noted on the estimate, that becomes a real nightmare. So what you'll want to do is go into your estimate. You'll want to go to those line items and change the note to revised. When you do that, it zeroes out everything. And then on those revised line items, you want to come down here and note the start of your revisions. So you can see start of 8/9/2023 revisions by Andy Patterson, and it shows you exactly what revisions I made. So the pipe jacks, I revised them from 3 regular pipe jacks to 3 lead pipe boots. The rain caps, I revised it from a quantity of 2 to 3. And then we didn't have exhaust vents on here originally, so I added those. And then here I have end of the August 9, 2023 revisions. So you'll want to document your revisions. You'll want to put the date on there and also your name, because if you have 10 people who have been in this estimate working on it, you don't know who made those revisions. Now you can go find out, but you have to do a little more digging, so it's so much easier just to have their name here. That way if you have any questions, you can call them, or you can see who actually wrote the revisions. So anyway, that is what the final estimate would look like. At this point, my reconciliation would be completed. So again, let's just recap what we talked about. When you get a reconciliation and there's a difference, then you're going to call the customer, explain that you got the contractor's estimate, and you're going to figure out what the differences are. Explain what your process is, give them a timeline and what to expect. Don't tell them you'll have the reconciliation completed in 2 weeks. It doesn't take you that long. And every day that the insured has to wait on your estimate, they're going to get more and more upset or more and more anxious. Now, the main thing, obviously, you want to ask the insured if they're using this contractor or not. Make sure they don't sign anything until you get your reconciliation done. Then after that, you're going to figure out the differences. Once you figure out what the differences are, then you're going to call the contractor and go over those differences and work together on those items. Now, there's some things that the policy is not going to be able to pay for. There's some things that we just missed as an insurance company, and we need to add on there. Explain what you're doing and the end result of your reconciliation. After that, call the customer, go over the new figures, send them the estimate, and once you send them the estimate, your part pretty much is done. You're going to close the file. If the contractor runs into something later on as they get into the repairs, then they'll contact you. But at this point, you're pretty much done with your file and you can close it. So anyway, guys, I hope that video helps. I will see you in the next one.